So back then I did not have the maturity always to understand that it was not about me. I thought everyone was out to, to go against me and to close down my company and, to get me out of the competitive landscape.
Yeah. What the research shows is that when you're trying to convey change and bring change, it automatically triggers people's apprehensions and fears and concerns. And what you're saying is we have to identify that fear or that risk, as they might see it, and address the substantive merits of whether that risk is reasonable.
I had to carry my voice beyond that meeting room. And the media is one of the ways to do it. We talk about personal branding, image and everything, but I think it's important to align your convictions with your image.
Many changes in the business world are not necessarily led by industry giants and leaders and CEOs. We see in the corporate world a lot of changes are advocated by people who are at a mid-management level, and in recent years we've seen advocacy for sustainable practices in the workplace, flexible hours and mental health conversations. Today's guest is an expert in decarbonisation in the construction industry. I'm very pleased to be joined by Laurena Erriah. Thank you very much for being on the podcast and for being very generous with your time and experience. Laurena, you are Head of Commercial at Ecoasis Energy Solutions, and you're a structural engineer by background. You've come back to Mauritius, so you studied in France, came back to Mauritius about a decade ago, and we know each other from a long time. We went same school year, and I'm very pleased to see the development and changes you bring to an industry which is the construction industry in Mauritius. You've held several roles in that industry since you came back, and you're now Head of Commercial at Ecoasis Energy Solutions. And as I've said, you've developed specialty interest in the area of low-tech energy buildings and decarbonisation in that industry. So for those who don't know too much about this, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about your career and what is that change that you help businesses to implement in that industry.
Yes, well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. A bit about me. So I went to study in France. I stayed for about a decade in France, and then I wanted to come back to Mauritius to contribute. And so engineering studies, and I started out in a very not an environmental friendly field, because I was specialized in the reinforced concrete construction. So when you think about that, it's not very, it's not very good for the environment. So after a decade, I think, I started to think more about what I was doing and its impact on the environment. And at the same time, I wanted to come back and contribute to the island. So it all sort of started to make sense for me that I needed to, get away from where I was and start something new, something maybe that was more aligned with my personal convictions and my personal values, which were, saving the environment. And it might seem very naive from that point of view, but I had like a dream of, starting maybe to align my profession of being a structural engineer to, towards more sustainable building practices. And Mauritius seemed to be at the time the most proper environment for me to do that.
I think there's a lot you've achieved so far in the last 10 years you've been here. We'll talk about that a little bit. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about Ecoasis. What does the company do?
Yeah, so Ecoasis is a company that is going to be celebrating its 30 years next year. So it's been in the Mauritian economic landscape for 30 years. It started out as an energy solutions provider for the sugar industry. So providing, energy solutions, boilers and turbines for these big factories. And I have great respect for, you know, all it has achieved so far, because it has managed to stay in line with, you know, what the industry was requiring, and it has adapted its solutions to, you know, to stay on this landscape for so many years. So now we are one of the leaders of the photovoltaic installations in Mauritius. And we also provide, you know, the whole energy solutions across the whole value chain. So we start with audits, recommendations, consultancy on how to reduce your energy consumption. And then we move on to providing the equipment. We provide maintenance of this equipment. So the equipment can be PV panels, it can be HVAC solutions. And then we maintain these equipment, and then provide, if the client wants it, energy management contracts. So very interesting,
So I mentioned earlier when we started this conversation that a lot of changes in the business world are not necessarily brought by people who are at the top of the league. And when you first came back to Mauritius, more than a decade ago now, so of course you were not in the leadership position that you are now. I wasn't at all. And I suppose it was a steep curve. And can you tell us, what was your first impression of the business world and the industry in which you were trying to bring to advocate for that change?
So my first impression was I was very impressed, because, you know, I came back after a decade of being in Europe, and I was, you know, exposed to all these norms, regulations, and, you know, high caliber professionals. And then I came back. I didn't really have any expectations as to the, you know, the business world, but I was impressed by, you know, the level of skill that I was surrounded with, actually. That impressed me a lot. But at the same time, it was very tough for me coming back.
Why was that?
On many levels, because one was the language barrier, because I was in a French working environment and in a very technical field, and I had to come to Mauritius, where it's very, you know, everything follows the British standards, the norms, and the, you know, all the technical language. That was tough. And then I was confronted to, I don't know how to put it, like in a nice way, but I was confronted to the corporate world here. You
can be raw and honest about it. That's fine.
So I was quite, I don't know how to say it, but it was a shock for me to come back, and I took quite a bit of time to adapt. And I think that was the catalyst for me to, you know, to take risk and say, okay, listen, if I want to stay in Mauritius and work in Mauritius, I'm going to have to build something on my own. You know, I won't be able to, like, conform or fit into the hierarchy structure of the corporate.
I definitely want to pick your brains on what that shocking culture in the corporate world here was back then. But before we get to that, were you able to share what the state of the industry was 10 years ago compared to now in terms of energy efficiency solutions?
Oh my God, there was nothing there. There was nothing. It was like we were using like rules and regulations that were used like 50 years ago by the British. The focus was on cyclonic conditions, so build strong resistant structures, because there was like a psychosis about, you know, we need to be able to withstand like 280 kilometer wind gusts. So the focus was on that, and there was absolutely no reflection on how to minimize our energy consumption in building, and that shocked me.
How about gender representation in that industry, the construction industry?
Well, you know, it was the same as in France. In France also, when I worked, I'm used to being the only woman in the room for even now I'm used to it, but it was not shocking for me. I mean, I was not the only woman when I started out working in Mauritius. I was the only woman civil engineer, actually, but there were other engineers that were women. And actually the first time I did a site visit, so a site inspection as a structural engineer, the guy at the gate thought I was lost. He told me, no, it's you took a wrong turn. This is a construction site. And I was like, I'm the structural engineer. And the look on his face was just, that did not happen to me in France, But I took it well. I mean, it was funny.
I think that context speaks a lot, because the environment in which you were trying to bring the changes that you have in mind is very important in terms of how you approach that objective. So as you said, you were in an environment where it was still is very male dominated. You're young, after only a decade. It's fairly early in a career.
Yeah, very early.
And you came back at a time where the energy efficiency concerns in the market were almost inexistent, if I may say so.
It was.
And in that environment, then you come with that dream of bringing a change in not just a company, but in a whole industry.
Yeah.
And now let's go to what you were saying about how shocking you found the corporate culture. What was shocking about the culture? And you can be as honest
there
as
was like
you
absolutely
want.
no flexibility. Like you had to arrive at 8:30 and it was not 8:32. It was shocking for me. Like, and then your lunch break was like noon to 1, and it was not like if you took 5 minutes more.
Right, that sort of rigidity.
Rigidity in the, in the hours, which I hope now I know it's not like that in many companies, because post-COVID,
You came back and joined at a sort of mid-level management.
Not even, no. Okay. I just came back and started, not as an entry-level engineer, but like I was just like an engineer,
What can you say about how conducive is that environment to allow you to bring a change, or to even advocate for change in the way that you wanted?
I don't think it was very favorable. I think I was. There were people in the company that listened to what I had to say. But then there were others who were just like dismissive of my concerns, and because for them I had no credibility, because I hadn't worked in Mauritius for a long time, and they had, and they were used to working with all the stakeholders. I mean, to put it into context, when you do a construction projects, there can be as many as like 25, 30 different stakeholders involved. Apart from the engineers, you've got the consultants, the clients, the architects, the landscape engineer, the civil one, the mechanical engineer, the guy who brings the finances, you've got bankers. So it was a whole, ecosystem around your project. And they used to, be in the room and have conversations with all of these guys and women. I hope there were women there too, but I did not, and I didn't have any credibility in their eyes. And I think they were right in that way, because the way you approach a project in Europe and the way you approach it here, it's definitely not the same.
So then, against that backdrop you've just set out, you then proceeded to set up something on your own.
I had an amazing opportunity. I mean, I met a great guy who is one of my mentors today, and who believed in me, and we set up a company, a consultancy in engineering in Mauritius, and who just told me, do it. I mean, do it. And I did not believe in myself like 100%, but I had the great luck of being surrounded by people who told me, like, if you can't do it, I mean, nobody can.
That's interesting. So you think that someone who showed you that they believe in you, and that's a way of boosting your confidence, did that help in then the next step of, because you've just explained that you felt a bit like out of place in some meetings where you're being either not even invited to and completely ignored, to then transitioning into a position where you're actually leading the conversation. And so how did that transition take place? And I'm sure the support of that guy would have meant a lot in terms of boosting your self-confidence.
Yes, I think we talk a lot about the imposter syndrome, and I definitely suffer from that.
We all do.
I think it's got to do with parenting, and I'm in the middle of asking myself all these questions because I'm a mom myself now, and anyway, that's a topic for another podcast, I think. But I definitely suffered from that, and being in an environment that was, dismissive of my views, it did not help at all.
Yeah.
And then there's, life happened, and I met, I can say his name, Laurent Erriah, who is one of my mentors still today, and I always turn to him for advice, even now. And he told me, no, you can do it because you're qualified, you've got the personality for it, you communicate well, you know your stuff, the technicality is not an issue for you, so I don't know why you're doubting yourself.
Yeah.
And that definitely helped me. I mean, if I didn't have that person at that point in my life, I don't know if I would have had the guts and, the courage to go through with starting a company from scratch and then being the competitors to all the established stakeholders in the male-dominated industry, as you pointed out.
Absolutely. No, I totally get what you mean. I mean, even I think in everyone's case, you need that push, you need that mentor, and I can say in my case, for example, I still go back to the mentor with whom I've started my career, almost like as a sounding board from time to time, because there's a new argument you want to bring in court. There's people might think you're crazy. The court might think I've not heard this before, but you think there's merit in it, and it's always good to have people you can use as a sounding board to say, hey, do you think that's arguable? Do you think I'm completely off track here, or am I going in the right direction? And it's not as if you need someone to validate your competence, but it's more for you to know, because of course there's a danger. Everyone has a danger of not knowing your blind spots, and because you're sometimes just so into so focused into something that you want it to be good, you want it to succeed. So it's important to have that environment where you've got people you can go to almost of course to discuss ideas and all that, but also to reassure yourself that you can do it.
And I feel we are so lucky to have people like that, because these people are so important. They're not your family, they're not your friends, they're just like there who've been silently watching your professional progress, and then that you can always go to them for advice, or just to bounce back a few ideas. And this has been a huge difference for me.
So then transitioning into that new setup that you bring with support of your mentor, and how do you see the difference then in meetings? And of course you're still in meetings sat with people who are a lot more experienced than you, and did you find any pushback to the ideas you were bringing, and how do you deal with them? How do you, in terms of communication, I mean, of course, what's your advice?
I don't know if I have advice, because I can tell you I was struggling a lot at first.
That's always good to hear. It reassures people that we're not the only ones.
I was like very young. I was like 30, when I started the company, and I was up against competitors that were on the market for the past 30 years, and who defined the engineering way of doing things in Mauritius. And everyone was like, their word is like God's word, and you don't go about and change what we have been doing for the past 40 years just by being here and telling people we can do differently. So it was tough. I had so much resistance, and I don't even know how I managed to get through all of that.
No, totally understand where you're coming from, because of course you've got those situations. Even in my case, I have clients who tell me they've seen someone else, another lawyer who's a lot more experienced, and this is what he thinks. And of course, in those situations, you don't want to be disrespectful of
No.
the other experienced professionals. Of course, everyone is entitled to their view. I think there's a way of bringing then your idea and what you have in mind without attacking anyone, and without making it come across as if you're being dismissive of other people, as if you know it all and you know better than them. Yeah.
So what I found helped a lot was, understanding. The first thing for me was understanding that it was not about me.
Yeah.
It's not personal, it's about the project, it's about the constraints of the project. So back then I did not have the maturity always to understand that it was not about me. I thought everyone was out to, go against me and to close down my company and, to get me out of the competitive landscape. Yeah. So if I had any, if I can share my journey, it would be like what helped me the most was adapting your language to the person in front of you. So my language was very different if I had an engineer in front of me. I would talk about the technical constraints. Okay, what's your fear? Or is it like cyclonic conditions? Is it like the site conditions? Right. Stay factual, stay on the technical side, and that would, we would be able to progress. They will not necessarily really agree with me, but the conversation would flow, and step by step you would get through where you want to go. And then if I had like the decision maker in front of me, I would talk about money. I would talk about, okay, the project costs this much. If you do it in a more sustainable way, it's not necessarily going to increase your capex. Here are the facts. Here's what it's going to cost you. And so that was how I managed to get around delivering my ideas and bringing about little steps.
And I think people see that and respect you for that, for not taking it personally, because as you say, that's a sign of maturity. And of course there's a process before you get there, and there are downfalls, and but you do get there realizing it's not about you, it's not about people doubting your competence, but they have
genuine fears.
Exactly. I think that's the right word, because I think what the research shows is that when you're trying to convey change and bring change, it automatically triggers people's apprehensions and fears and concerns. And what you're saying is we have to identify that fear or that risk as they might see it, and address the substantive merits of whether that risk is reasonable. Of course, you're not overpromising, you're not saying that the risk will disappear, but we need to assess the risk and see what's the benefit of bringing the change, in what way it can be of benefit in response to that issue, whether it's a monetary issue, whether it's a structural issue.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing, I think you gave an interview in Business Magazine, I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah, last time.
And one thing you said was you don't address decarbonisation as a change, but rather as an opportunity for innovation. And I thought that was very interesting, because that is how you're not bringing, because the moment you say change, people have their back up, and but so how do you present it in a meeting as like guys, I'm not turning tables here, but I am showing you what opportunity we have to make a difference. How does that conversation go?
I think it all depends on who you have in front of you, and now people are very receptive. 10 years ago when I started and I was talking about decarbonizing the construction industry in Mauritius, everyone was just like, what is she talking about? Now actually people are coming to me and asking me, we've got this project, how do you think we can bring about sustainable initiatives, and how do you think we can do differently? And so the conversation has changed,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm very, very glad to see that. I mean, after 10 years, it was, and as I said before, COVID helped a lot because people realized that, you know, doing business as usual it no longer works.
Yeah, yeah.
And also we've got a lot of regulative frameworks that are coming into place that are guiding these decisions. But yeah, I always think that to create value, you know, to create value in any industry, you have to innovate.
Yeah.
You can't create value if you keep doing on the same thing. And so I think my conversations about, you know, bringing a new method of doing things, bringing change, it's about what value is this change going to bring you as an organization, as an individual. And if you want to, you know, create value, then it's by default you have to innovate. You can't keep on doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
Yeah. I wonder whether you can share your experience in terms of the change over time in people's attitude. You know, you mentioned that when you first came back, let's say you were ignored in a certain way, despite you expressing, you know, your views about how this industry can be changed. Do you find that the same people have changed their minds, or are you seeing the change from another generation?
I don't know if these people have changed their mind. I think they're just, you know, adapting themselves to the market. Like when if I bring it to the construction industry and the stakeholders, you know, these people they just, at the end of the day, they follow a client's brief.
Yeah.
If the client's brief is to have like a building, a standard building, they will deliver. They will deliver a well-executed building within budget, aligned. But if the brief comes from the top, like, I want my building to be net zero emission, if that is the brief, then we have to deliver, you know. And what I find is that the conversations are starting to change at the top.
Right.
And it's not necessarily by conviction that my fellow engineers and, you know, other stakeholders are doing it. It's because the brief is coming and it's different now.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy to see that, you know, it's happening this way.
Yeah. I suppose you approach the market differently then, because you go to the top, to the clients, to have those conversations instead of having them with people in the construction industry.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this because I think as part of the process and with maturity, you understand how the market works, and you know with whom to have a conversation to bring the change.
Exactly.
You get to know that, and I suppose it's a bit of trial and error, because you try with a certain...
So many times.
and that's part of the process. You try at a certain level, and you know that, you know, you reach a point where it's not going to progress any further. You rethink of your strategy, and you realize that the change might happen at a different level with different stakeholders. Then you engage with them until you find the right stakeholder who is the right one to lead the conversation. Yeah.
I mean, you're totally right. It's a process as well, because you know, having these conversations with, even if with not the right people, it's what builds your credibility actually. Yeah. Because then you deliver. You deliver technically, you deliver, I mean, you deliver the work you're supposed to be doing, and then you start, you know, to build confidence and start having these conversations with the people that, you know, can decide. Yeah.
One thing I think I was telling you a bit earlier before we started recording, one thing I was glad to see over the years is you've always had a voice in the public domain, and and I think that's part of the reason why, you know, you've been able to effectively bring the change. And, you know, as you've said, you now see the conviction coming from the top, from the client, and not necessarily from from those who are active in the construction industry. And do you think that's important when you're making a change, to have some sort of collective voice? Because you're speaking in the media. I think you've had many articles, whether you've published yourself or you've been interviewed by the press on the subject, and it's about raising awareness and educating the market to get to the point where you can then have a real conversation in a meeting room, a real business conversation. Because without that background and without that education, the conversation might not even start.
For me personally, I think that helped a lot, because the other side, the other option was to simply stay an engineer and be in my own technical world and have only conversations with engineers. But as you said, I had a dream. I wanted the whole of Mauritius to know what my dream was. And that could not happen in a meeting room only with engineers and industry stakeholders. So I had to carry my voice beyond that meeting room. And the media is one of the ways to do it. And that helped, because it made me gain in maturity, because I understood that to convey a message, change a message, I had to learn how to do it in a non-technical way.
Absolutely.
And everyone could get what I was saying, even though they were not an engineer, they were not in the construction industry.
To what extent was the media interested in what you had to say initially? Well, let's say 5 years ago compared to now.
5 years ago, they were more interested in, me being a woman in a male-dominated industry.
Right. And you think the conversation has shifted from there to what you do substantively?
I think I took that as an opportunity, They decided to interview me on being because at the time when I started my consultancy firm, I was one of the only women directors of a consultancy engineering company in Mauritius. And so I used that as an opportunity. I was like, okay, that too is who I am, but it's not only that. And I use that to, redirect the conversation and say, okay, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about low tech in construction, how, we make more energy efficient buildings, how we reduce consumption before producing energy. So I think I used that as a means to shift the conversation about the message I wanted to convey.
Yeah, because you're using the platform that you have, that's been given to you.
Has been given, exactly.
And you're using, but as you say, you're using it to convey and spread the message that you're in charge of the agenda of that conversation.
And one more thing, I think that given the environment that we are in Mauritius, I think it's very important to, we talk about personal branding, image and everything, but I think it's important to align your convictions with your image. And giving these interviews for me was an opportunity to do that.
I think the landscape has changed so much over the last decade, especially with social media and platforms like LinkedIn, for example, where you have a lot of professionals, and that is a platform to express a view and perhaps even engage in conversations. We say that in the last over the last couple of years we've seen a shift in how people are using those platforms. And what's your view on if the young entrepreneurs, young or they are at a certain level in their careers where they feel that they would like to step out and bring a certain change or set up their own business, they don't have a platform to raise awareness about what they want to do. What's your advice to them, especially in terms of availability of platforms, whether in the media or social media, to raise awareness and bring about a change?
Well, I'm very old school. I think that, you know, you need to be good at what you do.
Absolutely.
You can't bluff.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what builds your credibility. So my advice would be, don't communicate on things that you don't, you know, absolutely maîtriser. I don't know how to say that.
Master, yeah.
Master, yeah. So, and then once you master this, master the subject, and then the communication will flow, you know, effortlessly. So I think I have an advice on what not to do.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of bluff on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Sorry to be blunt, but yeah.
No, that's I mean, honest. And
you can see.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see it.
Yeah, I think everybody can see it, and I think the reason why I'm asking you is because I think LinkedIn is a great communication tool and platform with the right message. But I fully agree with what you said about communicate about what you know and what you master, because that reflects on who you are. Because, you know, if you're communicating about a subject and that's conveying the message that you're an expert in it and that you're able to engage with people on that subject, but then if you're not able to go any further than that,
everybody's going to see it.
And you've done yourself a disincentive, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Laurena, we've talked about a few things about getting the right people behind you, having a mentor, having following the process, a bit of trial and error, and getting to know who are the people, who are the stakeholders with whom you actually engage to make a change. And it takes a while to get there. But from your experience, and that's a final question, if I may ask, from your experience, what advice would you give to someone who are at a stage in their career where they feel perhaps undermined in meetings or conversations with people who are a bit more senior and who lack that confidence to engage meaningfully? And so I wonder whether there is any advice that you can give from your own experience and journey.
I guess I would say stick to the facts. Just, you know, even if you feel overwhelmed, or I would say remember it's not about you, it's not personal, and just stick to the facts. And you came to the meeting for a particular, you know, aim. Just follow that line and then do your best.
That's great advice. I think that's great advice in terms of it's never about you.
Exactly, yeah.
You're the only one thinking it's about you. Nobody does. Right.
It's true in all cases, yeah.
Laurena, thank you very much for
participating
and being part of the podcast.
It's been great, thanks.